So my talk is called Permission to Feel. It's the title of my book. And I've added in this idea of calm and all other emotions. If you're interested in any information about our work, social media is right there, and websites for information, for links to our center, and the rest. So I'm going to start off with a quote that some of you probably have seen before. It's by a US president. No one cares how much you know until they know how much you care. Just take a moment and think about that, please. How does that quote resonate with you? Who comes to mind? What comes to mind? The reason why I like this quote is I work at an institution, a university, that absolutely does not care about feelings. We care about knowledge, right? I teach a course called Emotional Intelligence for undergraduates, and they all think they're coming to learn the theory, that in 1990 this paper was published, and in 2002 we did a paper where the correlation coefficient between emotional intelligence and well-being was 0.33. I don't even remember those papers, and I wrote them. And I say, I just wrote them to get tenure. I don't really care about these papers. It's not true. It's not true. I don't believe that. But there's a lot of pushback. And the students say things like, well, what do I need to get an A in emotional intelligence? And it drives me out of my mind. I say, but I don't really, this class is about like developing the skills and the practice. And they're not interested. And I usually get something like the following. Professor Brackett, I didn't need emotional intelligence to get into Yale. And I said, well, you're going to need it to get out. And I mean that because it drives me out of my mind. So the question is, since when does anyone need permission to feel? I mean, you all have your feelings every day, right? And when I was writing my book, I was asked by the publisher, well, you're the professor of emotional intelligence. Why aren't you calling like an emotional intelligence 5.0? And I said, because I think we're saturated, with these things that we call emotional intelligence in terms even like mindfulness. And I just want to start with asking you a few questions. Or first I'm going to share, then I'm going to ask. We know that in 1990 this theory was written. By the way, emotions have been around since humankind, right? It's the same with mindfulness and meditation practices, right? Well before any of us was here, right? There were practices around contemplation and meditation. In 1995, this big book is written by Daniel Goleman. Becomes the #1 best-selling book in the history of pop psychology. 1997, revisions are made to theories, and for the last 20 years or 22 years, essentially, right, there's been assessments and interventions and consulting and coaching. The CASEL, which is, Kim and I are both on the board of CASEL, the Collaborative for Academic, Social, and Emotional Learning, was formed 25 years ago. And so think about this. Emotional intelligence, everybody's doing it, everybody's getting coaching on it, companies are buying these programs, schools, everyone says they're doing SEL now. But yet, in America at least, we know that 18% of the population is affected by anxiety disorders. 25% of the kids between 13 and 18 are diagnosed with anxiety. 60% of our college students have overwhelming anxiety. 40% of college students report feeling so depressed they had difficulty functioning. Depression is the leading cause of disability worldwide. In America, the suicide rate has increased 28% in the last 20 years. It's the second leading cause of death among college students. 20% each year. So listen to this. And research that we've done in the state of Connecticut, every year for the last 6 years, there has been a 20% increase in students seeking treatment for mental health problems. So we go into bullying and assault and suspension. About a third of kids on average are bullied each day in our nation's schools. We know there's a disproportionate number of children of color who are being suspended. We know that in America, there's been a 100% increase in the United States in the number of hate crimes being reported to the Anti-Defamation League, particularly around anti-Semitism. And then we look at technology. You've heard this. The average teen spends 6 hours a day on technology. We know there's a correlation between anxiety and depression and technology. And I think the most interesting thing in terms of what's the most scariest thing is that for the first time ever, teenagers are saying, I prefer to talk to my friends via text than in person. So then we jump into the workplace. And we find that 50% of employees are unengaged. 13% say they're miserable. In a study that we just finished, 50% of employees use the word stressed, frustrated, overwhelmed to describe their feelings at work. So I'm just always wondering, if everybody's doing all this work on emotional intelligence and every school is adopting social and emotional learning and mindfulness-based practices, like what's going on? Why is the world getting worse? I have some hypotheses, obviously. But before I go there, let's just check in. It's the end of the day for all of you. I'm between you and your Pinot Grigio. On the x-axis, it's the word pleasantness, right? All of you are feeling some degree of pleasantness right now. Think about it. -5, you have the thoughts in your head like, I'm going to lose it. I got to get out of here. Like, I can't take it. I'm saturated. -3, you're thinking to yourself, well, I could be here with Mark. I could be home with my family. I could be at work. It's all the same misery. Maybe you're neutral. Maybe you're at +3 in pleasantness. Like, you're just thinking to yourself, my goodness. Or maybe you're at +5 in pleasantness. It's possible. There are no words to describe, right? It's like, you're like, oh my God, I want Mark to move in. He could be my personal coach on emotional intelligence. So where are you right now in terms of your pleasantness? Be honest with yourself. -5 to +5. It's your appraisal of the present moment. The y-axis says energy. Literally, it's your activation. What is your body telling you? Is your body saying depletion, depletion, depletion? Or is it saying energize, energize, energize? Seriously, what are the signals coming to you from your body? And then we put them together and we create our medidor emocional. Yellow, high energy and pleasant. Raise your hand if you're in the yellow right now. Okay, green, pleasant but lower in energy. Anyone in the blue or the red? Couple people, but I would say 90%, 95% of the room says they're in the yellow and green. Interesting. Hold that for a moment. What I want you to do now is replace your color with a feeling word. You have 3 seconds to find the feeling word that best describes your emotions right now. Freeze. I want an honest raise of hands. How many of you had some trouble finding the precise word? Hands up high. Hands up really high. All right, hands up, keep it up, keep it up, keep it up. Please look around the room. So 90% of the room. Most of you are educators, right? Let's just put this together. So 90% of our educators who are interested in mindfulness, like actually putting effort into mindfulness and social emotional learning, are emotionally illiterate. So we have some growth opportunities here. Next question for you. How many of you during the next 40 minutes or so that I have with you will get distracted? Anyone? You'll like your hands up high. All right, so look around the room. So let's put this all together, right? We have emotionally illiterate, attention deficit disordered educators. So the question is, what's your strategy? What is your strategy to get through the last 40 minutes of the day? Coffee, read books, take notes.
Sit at the front.
You're going to sit in the front. You're going to dream? Like dream and like, I can't wait till it's over? You're going to fantasize. Whoa, all right, that's too much. Yeah. All right. Any strategies over here? So she's going to go into her own world. Someone's going to drink coffee. Someone's going to take notes. I'm sorry? You're going to fidget. So we're going to fidget, fantasize, sit in the front. You're going to pay attention. All right. Anyone else? I'm sorry? Coffee. You're going to have more coffee? Okay. Any other strategies? Yes?
I think your lightness and humor is keeping me engaged.
So you're going to rely on me? All right. I should tell you, like, in my course evaluations, Like I do the little entertaining thing the first few minutes, and my students usually say something like, the first class is great, it's downhill from there on. Any other strategies?
Looking forward to home.
Thank you. So now let's think about this. I am a substitute teacher in one of your schools. Good morning, everybody. My name is Mr. Mark. I'm going to be your teacher this week or the next few months because your teacher's on paternity leave. And I know that your school's using social emotional learning and you've adopted Ruler or the mood meter. And I'm going to check in. And I know your parents are going through divorce. I know that you've got some learning differences. And I know that you've been bullied a lot and that you've got some major stress issues. But here are some strategies. What I want you to do is get a cup of coffee. And if that doesn't work, just sit in the front. Get in front. Right? And if that doesn't work, just breathe. And if that doesn't work, right? What are you going to, just take notes. And if that doesn't work, just fantasize. All right, so are we getting the picture here? Like, we've got some work to do? And, the people who shared, I apologize. My goal was not for you to dislike me immensely. But I really want us to get real about the strategies, that we are doing on a daily basis, right, to support ourselves, as we've heard about so much today, as well as teach our kids. And as you think about it, like today, I just asked you how you're feeling right now at the end of the day. But life is a really intense roller coaster of emotions. I mean, take a moment and think about the average student who you've taught over the last year. When they wake up in the morning, how do they feel? When they're commuting to school, how do they feel? Class 1, Class 2, Class 3, Class 4, lunch. What are the relationships like with their peers, with their different teachers? The afternoon classes, test, no test. It's the end of the school day. Where are they going? Tutoring, club, how are they feeling? Getting home for dinner, how are they feeling? Evening routines, how are they feeling? And you start realizing that that question is a complex one because it's more than just how are you feeling today. It's how are you feeling minute by minute, hour by hour throughout the day. And here's the research. So what we found in our research when we interviewed 45,000 high school students was that their number one emotion was tired. Then they said they were stressed, and they said they were bored. We found across schools, this is a big study, I'm just showing you a little bit of it, that stress and boredom was ubiquitous, whether you were in a really rich private school or in a high poverty school. But what we found was that the general well-being of our high poverty students was about 30% lower than the well-being of our students who were in higher SES areas. When it came time to looking at the granular aspects of emotion, what we found was that meanness and cruelty seemed to be the strongest predictor of fear and hopelessness. I can relate to that. I hated school. I was a C&D student when I was a kid. I was bullied horrifically as a child. And I just didn't fit in. And it's true. I really was. I was fear of danger, danger, danger. Who's going to hurt me today? And then I felt like, guess what? There's nothing I can do about it. I'm hopeless. How many of you believe that's the best place for learning or innovation or creativity? Hard work. It's hard. But what we found was that among these students, positive relationships and engaging instruction and relevance and meaningfulness, that what I'm learning, like, it's relevant and meaningful to my goals, to what I want to get out of school. Those were the students who felt the most positive feelings, like acceptance and connection and hopeful and interested and happy and respected. So at Yale, I've decided to study our students because, my goodness, for $85,000 a year, you better be happy. But unfortunately, they're not. 80% of the students report feeling stressed by October. And here's the interesting thing. I started not believing in them. Because I don't think people have granularity in their self-awareness. So they say they feel stressed, but what I did with them is as a teacher, I said, I want you to write the narratives. I want to know what's going on for you. And what I learned was they're actually envious. They're living in envy. They're saying this one's father's a famous politician, free ride to Washington. This one's mother's a hedge fund manager, free ride to the big firms. This one that, this one that. And they're just endlessly comparing themselves to other people. So I went to the counseling center, and I said, what's your strategy? I wasn't popular that day. And they said, well, we're doing mindfulness. I said, okay, but everybody's stressed. So what's happening? And they said, well, we have yoga too. I said, well, I want to know, of the 5,000 undergraduates and 5,000 graduate students, how many of them are going to the yoga classes? It wasn't popular when I made that comment or question. And, well, they fill up. There's like 10 students every Sunday morning. I'm like, 10 students? Like, I don't understand. And then I said, but they say they're stressed, but they're actually feeling envious. So what's your strategy for dealing with the envy? Because I don't know of a study that shows that downward dog reduces envy. I always have this, I always imagine like you're in downward dog and like the envy just comes out. But I'm not sure that's the way it happens. And then we found out that the strongest predictor is loneliness, psychological loneliness. Because they're with people, but they feel lonely, even when they're among others. So we went to teachers. Obviously, they're doing great. Frustration, number one emotion that teachers say they feel. And here's what we found in the study with teachers. We found that their climate of their school was the strongest predictor of the negative emotions they experience each day. And in turn, what we found was that was associated with greater burnout, stress-related absences, sleep troubles, mental health problems, even body mass index, which is an indicator of body fat. So literally, the culture and climate of our schools is affecting our teachers' mental and physical health. So we went to, we went to the workforce. They say they're stressed too. 15,000 people, representative sample of the United States. 15,000 people from farming to finance to filmmaking. So we go to that mood meter, it looks like all of you are like the chosen ones, right? Because you're all, 90% of you are in the yellow and green, but the rest of the world, at least where I live, all seem to be living in that red and blue. And it's interesting because when we ask people, well, how do you want to feel? What do they tell us? Happy. Everyone wants the pursuit of happiness. I think that's problematic too. Because when you think about striving every day, and I've read all the books. I've read every happiness book. They're friends of mine, these authors. And they shouldn't be listening to my presentation right now. I'm a neurotic Jewish professor. I will never be happy. I just won't. It's not in my gene pool. Like, I beg for contentment. And I tried all these happiness programs, and I was like, wake up, all right, Mark, be grateful today. What are you going to be grateful for? 3 times a day, every day. I'm like, shit, it's Thursday. Like, I'm not grateful anymore. And then I'm like, no, set a happiness goal. And I think what's happened is we've gotten crazy about all these like fixes of, and the goal is to be happy. One of my colleagues, a faculty member in my center, her son goes to a public school, and he was crying, and the teacher said to him, boys, don't cry. Let's think about what you need to be happy today. She didn't know why he was crying. Do you see what I'm getting at? Now, take a look at pull the happy out. Because in this study, what we did is we asked people, what's the first word that comes to mind for how you want to feel? And then the second, the third, fourth, fifth. Because we wanted to get from their perspective, what are the words? And I think what's interesting is you pull out happy, and then look what comes up second, respected. Third, appreciated. And then you get excited and joyful and fulfilled and accomplished and supported. Do you notice that most of those emotions are what we call social emotions? They're about feelings that we have when we're in relation to other people. Respected is about how we get along and do you value me? Supported, connected, etc. Oh, so much work. Because then we find out how people are regulating. Fantasizing, right? sitting in the front. I gave a talk recently to about 800 high school educators in the state of Connecticut where I live, and I started off the day with checking in on the mood meter. They were not interested in doing it. And I said, what's your strategy? And one guy looked at me and goes, I'm going to put vodka in my coffee. And I said, does anyone else have another strategy? And another person said, I'm just staring at the clock waiting for this to be over. And I said, any other strategies? Another person said, I'm going to visualize my dog. And we wonder why, our mental health is declining. But it really frightens me, to be honest with you, when you really get down and dirty into it, and when you think about these are the people who are educating our children. Of course, none of you use those strategies. You just ignore, avoid, deny, suppress, complain. In New York City, I was doing a training recently, and the teacher said, I remove my feelings before entering school. Now, it happened to be that I was at that school. This is a preschool, by the way. True story here. In that school, there was a little boy hysterical crying, like really losing it. And the counselor came up to me and said, he's having a really bad day. And I said, well, what's the story? And she goes, well, the parents are going through divorce. That morning, the father walked into this 4-year-old's bedroom and said, your mother loves another man and you're going to have a new daddy. And the kid was dropped off at school. Think about that. Am I going to tell that little 4-year-old, just remove your feelings before entering the school? Just take a breath. Just sit in the front. Just fantasize. So I think the real reason, or what I want to talk about today, is that I think the reason why the work on mindfulness and the work in social emotional learning is not really having the impact that we want it to have, it's because we don't want to do the hard work. Our emotional lives are complex. And we want to do these exercises. And we found this at Yale. We started a mindfulness-based training program for our students. And what we found was the adherence to the protocol was next to nothing, 0. They only were practicing when we had the class. They wouldn't do it on their own. They literally did not implement the activities when they were by themselves. They would only do it when they were getting credit for doing it. So the center that I have the privilege of running is called the Center for Emotional Intelligence, and our vision is to use the power of emotions to create a healthier and more equitable, innovative, and compassionate society. And there are 5 reasons why you're listening to me today. And it's not because of my opinion. It's because of the research. We argue that emotions matter for 5 critical reasons. The first is attention, memory, and learning. And you all know this already, right? Emotions drive the learning process. The reason why I was a C&D student is obviously not because of my IQ. I mean, let's be real. I'm really freaking smart. That humor, I guess, doesn't work in Canada. It's okay. I can be proud of my intelligence, just so you know. But I was not functioning. I could not function because I was being abused. When your brain is in fight or flight mode or freeze mode, right, it's not available for learning, period. Just the basic science shows that now. Decision making. Has anyone here ever made a bad decision? Anyone want to just get it off their chest right now? So we know that how you feel drives the choices that you make each day. I'll give you an example. We did a study with teachers, randomly assigned. Good mood, bad mood, good mood, bad mood. Just take a moment to think about a good day, bad day, good day, bad day. And then we said, here's the same essay to grade. 1 to 2 full grades difference in the way the teachers evaluate. At the end of the study, we said, do you believe that how you felt had any influence over the way you graded the paper? 90% denied it. So what that tells us is that how we feel influences how we see the world and the judgments we make, and that happens mostly outside of conscious awareness. The third is relationship quality. We've heard a lot about that today. At their core, emotions are signals to approach or avoid. So our facial expressions, our body language, our vocal tones, how we feel on the inside are signals. Approach, avoid, approach, avoid. If I got up here as your presenter and was like this, what are you looking at? The fourth is physical and mental health. For the first time in the United States, adolescents are more stressed out than the adults who are raising them. 50% of the undergraduates at my institution are seeking treatment for mental health challenges. And finally, performance and creativity. Think about it. Has anyone here ever tried to be creative? It's hard, isn't it? It's hard to really achieve your dreams in the world. I can't tell you how many times I've been, demoralized by people trying to do this work. Superintendents even of districts, they say things like, I care about facts, not feelings. I've done presentations where people have stood up and said things like this. I'll never forget this one. I don't think I like this approach. And I'm like, I don't think I like you. We don't have to work together. You can keep on damaging the kids in your district. I have a lot of courage now. I'm a fighter. So my question to all of you is, are you a scientist or a judge about emotions? Do you see yourself as being an emotion scientist, or do you see yourself as being an emotion judge? What's the difference? Well, here's what I'm here to share with you. When I was a kid, I had abuse in my childhood. I was also bullied as a kid. And I had two parents they loved me, I knew that, but they didn't know really what to do. They didn't have the underlying skills, really. My mother was very anxious, very, very anxious. I'm having a breakdown is what I heard pretty much every day. My father was a tough guy, so he was, son, toughen up. Do I look like a tough guy? Didn't happen. But I was blessed in life with an uncle. His name was Uncle Marvin. And he was a miracle because he was the only adult in my entire life, including all the educators that I ever had, who asked me a simple yet profound question, which was, how are you feeling? But he didn't put the words in my mouth. And when I said I hate myself, I'm fat, I'm a loser, nobody likes me, and I hate the world, and I hate school, and I'm embarrassed, and I'm feeling gross, he wasn't, get some grit, right? Or toughen up. Or don't tell me I'll have a breakdown. He said, well, what can I do to support you? What do you need? What can we do together? So when we talk about calm, right, he was that co-regulator. He was the only adult who held me and my feelings. My question to all of you is, did you have an Uncle Marvin? Was there an adult in your life who provided you that unconditional love and support, who was the scientist, the compassionate emotion scientist, and not necessarily the emotion judge? Because the difference is pretty stark. Right? Uncle Marvin was open and curious and reflective. He viewed all the emotions I was experiencing as information. He didn't judge any of them, because I only had negative ones. He was always in learner mode. He wanted to get granular. He really wanted to know my specific experiences. And he wanted to find out where it was coming from. And the great thing is that he was so hopeful. Right? He just said, let's get through this together. As opposed to many people in my life who were the emotion judges, critical, closed, and ignored. They viewed emotions as noise. They're in knower mode. Why are you so angry all the time? Why are you so sad? Get over it. They're clumpers. It was either good or bad. They went with intuition, which is often biased. And they had a very fixed mindset. My father did not deal well with his anger, and he'd say, son, this is who I am, deal with it. That's an emotion judge, not an emotion scientist. So then the question is, all right, what are the skills that we have to learn to be that scientist? And what we've identified are 5, and that's where you've heard about our work. We call it RULER. It's an acronym for these 5 basic skills of emotional intelligence. The first one is recognizing emotions, identifying emotions accurately, right, through interpreting our own physiology, our own cognitions, through identifying the emotions of others by paying attention to facial expressions, body language, and vocal tone and behavior. Understanding emotions, knowing where are they coming from? So if I were to quiz you right now, I'm going to do this right now. You got 10 seconds. What's the psychological difference between anger and disappointment? Who feels confident? You get a free book that's donated by somebody here. I'll pay for it. Yes.
Anger's got a lot of energy behind it, where sadness has a lot.
Anger's energy, sad, lack of energy. But I want to know the psychological, you're probably on to something, but I want to know psychologically what makes someone feel disappointed versus angry. Yes.
I wonder if anger is explosive outward and disappointment is internalized.
But what's the psychological difference?
Expectation on another person.
Expectation versus what's it? Well, then which one is which?
Anger is just the emotion
Anger is just the emotion? Has no cause?
to your expectation.
All right, freeze. So do you see what I'm getting at here about this granularity in terms of our real awareness of emotion? Disappointment is about unmet expectations. Like everything you gave me as a teacher is legitimate. So when I was studying martial arts as a kid, because my father, the one thing he did do for me, which was great, is he put me into karate. I actually became a 5th degree black belt. But when I wanted to be a yellow belt, which is going to make me tough, my father, I said, Daddy, I'm going to take this yellow belt. I said, Sensei, give me the test. Sensei, give me the test. Sensei, give me the test. 5 blocks, 5 kicks, 5 punches. Failed the freaking yellow belt test. Not cool. I get home. I hate you. I'm never going to karate again. What happened? My mother was activated by my facial expressions. She said to me, who do you think you are talking to? Get to your room. Wait till your father gets home. Can't wait for Daddy to get home because he's so skilled in emotional intelligence. Right? Daddy comes home, up the stairs. Son, if I have to tell you one more time, if you don't stop talking to your mother that way, I'm going to lose it. And he would often lose it. But then my parents would get into a fight because my mother would be like, that's not the way we should handle it, blah, 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 blah. And then my father would leave the room. My mother often would come back and say something to me like this. You know something, Mark? I saved you this time. Now, what they don't know, well, firstly, how was I feeling? How was I feeling when I came home? What do you think? Disappointed, embarrassed, sad, anger, hopeless, freeze. How do you know? Thank you. You're all emotion judges right now because you are analyzing how I'm feeling, or I should say you are judging how I'm feeling by analyzing my behavior. Behavior does not correlate with emotion. Behavior does not correlate with emotion. What you don't know is that I did fail the yellow belt test, legitimately fail the blocks only. Oh, shoot. Everything that was legitimate, disappointed. I didn't get those blocks right. It could have been anger. The sensei right before the test said, you know, Mark, you can't take the test with your best friend, Mike. Someone else is going to take the test. What do you mean? That's not fair. That's ridiculous. You didn't tell me that in advance. Now I'm angry that I didn't do well. But the real story was that the bullies who were also in karate threatened me when I was changing in the locker room and said, guess what, Mark? We're going to beat the heck out of you tomorrow morning on the way to school. We knew you were going to fail the test, you loser. But I came home expressing what? Looks like anger. Fear, whatever. I don't know what it was. It was just acting out to get attention because I was desperate. But I didn't have the language, I didn't have the skills to communicate it effectively. I triggered my parents and was punished. But what they never knew was that I was going to get beaten up the next day. So when we were talking today about adults first, you can see how critical it is for the adults in our nation, all of our nations, right, to be those emotion scientists, not those emotion judges. Because the last 2 skills around, well, that's the labeling piece, is you can't label for me. You got to find out how I'm actually feeling. Is expressing and regulating, right? Think about that. Do I have the permission to express my feelings? Can I be true and real? And I have found out in my travels around the world that people don't feel safe necessarily being true to how they're feeling, nor telling people how they really feel. People in relationships for 20 years and have not shared how they really feel. Think about that. So then there's the regulation strategies. Like, what are we doing to support our own and other people's emotion regulation? Do we have the underlying skills to deal with our own and other people's emotions? And what I want to share with you is something that I think is just so important to think about. The first is that emotion regulation is very effortful. It takes so much effort to regulate, especially when we're tired and when we're hungry and when our resources are depleted. It's developmental. It's very specific to the emotion. So we don't use the same strategies to deal with anger as we do disappointment or frustration or overwhelm. For years, I thought I had anxiety problems. I really did. I thought I was stressed out all the time. I was going up for tenure and had heartburn. I went to the doctor, and he's like, no problem. This is what happens at our university. Here's your Prilosec, and here's your Ativan. I was like, that's the strategy? And then I realized I'm not stressed. I'm okay. I'm pretty resilient. I realized I wasn't anxious. I was pretty certain I was going to be successful in my career. I was overwhelmed. I was chronically overwhelmed. And the only thing that was going to support me in reducing my overwhelm was getting stuff off my plate. I had to get stuff off my plate. There was no other way. It's personalized. It has to be permitted and encouraged. Guess what? Not everybody's allowed to do the strategies, right? Imagine a third grader, I'm going for a coffee. Right? You can't leave the room, or I need to stretch. Well, guess what? That's distracting. They have to be practiced, evaluated, and refined. And last thing I want to say about this is that there is no criterion of correctness. And that's what I think makes this work so hard for us, is that we think our strategy is the best strategy and we project it onto other people. Like, I only like hot vinyasa yoga. I hate all other kinds of yoga. Restorative yoga makes me angry. But I'm not gonna, you like restorative yoga? Do it. Like, there's no judgment here. You've got to find what works for you, and you've got to practice it and then be a scientist about the strategy you're using. Is it working for you to achieve your well-being? Is it working for you to build and maintain relationships? Is it working for you to achieve your dreams in life? And what we know is that there's greater impact when you use these strategies in helpful ways. So I want to wrap up. I only have about 5 more minutes. In that there are lots of strategies. We've talked a lot about mindful breathing and mindfulness exercises today. Obviously, many of them were extremely supportive. You have to know that all these strategies have what we might call moderators, that if you don't get enough sleep, it's really hard to breathe and meditate. You're just so tired, right? Mindful breathing is excellent. Sometimes it can get in the way. I'll give you an example. My brother has 2 high school students. They're my nieces and nephews, and they live in Princeton, New Jersey. And my brother, literally, I was at their house over the holidays in September, and my brother's like, what's up with this mindfulness stuff? I said, what do you mean? Like, we know, we use it all the time. He's like, yeah, but they're making Sophia breathe all the time. I said, okay, like, what's the problem with it? Well, she got so relaxed, she fell asleep taking the test. So you can imagine, right? There's a time and the place for all of this work. And I think what happens is schools get obsessed that, like, the breathing exercises are going to solve all the anti-Semitism. I'm sorry, that's not going to stop anti-Semitism. Just like yoga, just like other strategies, right? We need to really make sure we're helping students develop a wide range of strategies to support them. Obviously, you've heard about relationships and doing things that are meaningful to you and all these self-talk strategies. So here's what we know from the research. Children with more developed skills look like the column on the right. Those with less developed skills look like the column on the left. Among educators like yourself, obviously you can see that having these skills makes a difference in your life. Among leaders, remember I said that the teachers are all frustrated? Well, I was wrong. I lied. It's only in schools where the principal does not have high emotional intelligence. Has anyone here ever worked for someone who is emotionally unskilled? And how many of you, when you wake up in the morning, say to yourself, yes, I can't wait to go to work? Interestingly enough, there is no difference in workload. You work the same amount of hours and effort. But look at this. Your frustration is 50% different. 50% difference in daily frustration. Emotional exhaustion and burnout, 30% different. Intention to leave the profession, 25 to 30% different. On the opposite side, your feelings of inspiration are 50% higher when you work for someone who has these skills. And your job satisfaction is significantly higher. So my point really, is that these skills are not so soft. Does that resonate with you? As a matter of fact, people are dying for them in the workforce. So in my last 2 minutes, I just want to share with you some of our thinking. Hopefully, you're realizing now that the goal is to move away from piecemeal approaches, from a single assembly or a single classroom kit or a flavor of the month to a more systemic approach. This looks overwhelming, but it's pretty straightforward. Right? It's preschool through high school. It's all the adult learning. It's all the supports from curriculum to monitoring and evaluation tools. What we've learned is that you got to have everybody on the bus. There are 4 things that we focus on that I think are relevant to all approaches. The one is, can we get more people to be those emotion scientists? 2, can we recognize that these skills have to be deepened in everybody? And then 3rd and 4th is that this is never about the individual. It's always about the setting. When I was a kid, my parents, while they didn't know what to do, they put me in therapy. It was helpful for a little bit, but then I got dropped into a toxic classroom. I got dropped back into a really dysfunctional home. So the therapy just didn't have the impact because the contexts weren't developing with me. So are we focusing on how people feel at the systems level in our schools and communities? And are we infusing this into our pedagogy and practices? So very briefly, we have some tools. We say there's too many rules in schools, not enough feelings. I encourage you to ask your colleagues, how do you want to feel? Find out what they're hoping to feel more of, and then work together as a faculty to experience more of those feelings. As you can see, people are looking to feel more peaceful, more fulfilled. Those are all related to our theme of feeling calm. You can even do this at the family level or at the high school level. The mood meters are a tool for building awareness, and there are a million ways to do this through personal storytelling and linking it to the curriculum and having students go home and teach their families and thinking about all the strategy you can use to regulate. You can even think about this in terms of instruction, that there's different moods that are more or less helpful for different types of learning activities. You can even have kids make a gift for their family. We found that the parental work is very difficult. People don't have time to come in for the workshops. So what we find is that let the students be the teachers of their parents. You heard very graciously about our app. That's just one tool to help you build that awareness. We have other tools we call the meta moment for dealing with those triggers. Raise your hand if you are triggered at work by anybody. Anybody activated? I'm activated. I grew up in a very, as you can see, like interesting family. So where I work, I often get, Professor Brackett, I've got a question, but I'm not really sure of the answer. I don't know about you, but that activates me. I always think to myself, I don't know the answer, but I'm going to grade your freaking paper. And then I remind myself that I'm the professor of emotional intelligence. Mark, use your strategies, remain calm. It's hard. So we help people reach for their best selves. And they're contextual, right? Mark, the best self presenter, is different than Mark, the best self professor. We also need to learn how to move away from me and problem solve and engage in perspective-taking exercises. And honestly, at the middle and high school level, it's really all about me, me, me. They want to know more about who they are, their identity. They want to know they want to think about their own goals and what's being relevant to them and how they're going to achieve their goals. I want to say a few things about implementation. I think we so focus on the kids, but we don't really prepare enough in our schools for the full adult development. Our model is a year of readiness and planning, a year of adults, then students and families, then sustainability. What I'll end with is that there is good data here to show that these approaches work. These are data from our approach, but at Castle and other people have done meta-analyses to show that these practices do make a difference. We're now doing this at the university itself. We've got to deal with the crisis in our university. Here's what I like about what 2 students shared with me this year. I never thought a Yale class could make me feel an emotion other than inferiority. I'm glad I was wrong. This course gave me a sense of waking up from a long dream. I had this feeling of not actually being alive or here for many years. And now I feel that I'm out of my slumber. If I had to describe the way I saw my life in colors, before it would be a pale gray, and now it would be a bright white. almost as if I had a new blank canvas to put vibrant colors on. This course taught me that one can improve and detoxify through paying attention to one of the basic principles of living. So, to conclude, can I ask all of you to give yourself the permission to have all your feelings and give other people the same permission? Understand that all emotions are information. Try to be that emotion scientist and not that emotion judge. Appreciate that these are hard skills. They get classified as soft skills. It drives me crazy. You will need to spend your entire life building the strategies that you need to support being calm or inspired. There are creative ways to do this. I'm going to argue for the rest of my career that unless we take a systems approach, we're not going to get the outcomes that we all care about. You have to accept that it's never too early or too late to do this work. Check in regularly, be the role model, and monitor your strategies. And in conclusion, I get a lot of pushback still. Even with my book, people were pushing me back. They said, well, Mark, but you with all your trauma, you're a professor at Yale, you've made it, you're successful. And I say, I'm really fortunate, like really fortunate. A, I had my Uncle Marvin. B, I had my martial arts. C, therapy. D, I majored in psychology. E, I got a doctorate in emotional intelligence. F, I spent 25 years of my life dedicated to curriculum development, testing it, practicing it. Like I put a lot of effort in to my development. And then I walk around in LA public schools where 60% of these kids have PTSD, and I go to New York City where I'm doing work in the schools, and 1.1 million kids, and 100,000 of them are living in temporary housing or homeless. And the data, and I say to myself, but my goodness, is everyone going to have an Uncle Marvin? Is everyone going to get an martial arts? I don't think so. I don't think we can rely on hope. So I will end by saying I believe it is our moral obligation to take seriously the emotional lives of our children and the adults who are raising them and teaching them. Thank you.